it's really hard for people to narrow down what they're doing as a consultant because they think I can do everything, so I should do everything. And it's really the opposite. The more niche you can get, the more specific you can get, and for whom, the easier it is to sell your services, to be known for something, to charge more, because you become that expert in that space.
From the news team at LinkedIn, I'm Jessi Hempel, and this is Hello Monday. It's our show about the changing nature of work and how that work is changing all of us. And if you're here today, it's probably because you care a lot about how to be a great consultant. Maybe you're a person who's just getting started and you have a lot of questions. Maybe you've been doing it a long time, and so you've really sharpened the things that you're great at, and you know exactly where you'd like to work. Or maybe you're just starting to wrap your mind around this as a possible path for the future. Regardless of where you're at, I'm here to tell you that consulting is the single best path forward for the mid-career and senior professional in 2025. Full stop. I'm serious here. You know, most of my peers, people who are about my age, when we're moving out of full-time roles, we look around for new full-time roles, and what we're seeing is often jobs that aren't as exciting as the ones we're leaving. Maybe they don't pay as well. Maybe they don't give us the grand purview. Maybe they're just not there. And in the face of that uncertainty, we discover that the best option, literally, is to make it up. That's what consulting is at its best. Now, maybe you're a person who thinks, well, you know, I don't really have the chops to be a consultant. I'm not a salesperson. Or I'm not great at the administrative side of this business. I don't know about this. I'm here to tell you, you don't have to be great at everything. You simply have to know who to ask. Today's guest is exactly who you should ask. Her name is Erin Halper, and she is the founder of The Upside. The Upside is a community for consultants. Maybe if you're listening, you're already part of it. They help each other. They lean on each other, and Erin is their ringleader. She is their constant coach. She is their voice of reason. Now, Erin herself started in private equity before she launched her own consultancy. Most of what she brings to the table, she has learned through experience and through community. Today, we are going to get into everything involved in how to do this work right. Here at Hello Monday, we have heard your questions. We have been collecting them, and we are going to put them to Erin. We're going to talk about pricing. We're going to talk about how to build new business, how to extend in new directions. We're going to talk about how we navigate our careers in an uncertain future, the truth of what it means to move back and forth between full-time work and consulting over the course of a career. And Erin is going to remind us of the confidence that comes from working in community with others. Now here's Erin Halper.
I like to tell people to create a checklist. I say, list every single thing you can do. I mean, everything you can do. Cross off everything you don't enjoy doing, because please don't start a consultancy doing work you don't enjoy. That would be the opposite approach. So cross off anything you just genuinely don't like to do. Then circle the things that, if they were a full-time job, and just that thing was a full-time job, would get paid the most money. Circle those things. Then, of those things circled, you'll probably have 3 at that point, 2 or 3. Of those things circled, what are the ones that you would say are the most urgent right now for companies?
Right.
That's the thing you should be doing. And if you want to get even deeper, create a list of the different industries you've worked in and look at your network. Where does your network lie? Because what I see people do is they say, oh, well, most of my network is in real estate private equity, but I really want to be in venture capital. Mm-hmm. Well, it's going to be really hard to build a consultancy around the venture capital space if your background's real estate private equity. So sticking with an industry that you have a huge network in, you can open those doors, is going to serve you really, really well.
So, Erin, you really need to build off what you already have. If you think about what you have built an education around, built expertise around over the course of your life, that's like your bank, and you need to draw from the bank in order to be prepared to be successful. What are other mistakes that people make early on as they're getting started?
Oh, boy. There's a lot. So let's save people from making these mistakes. Number one, they try to do everything by themselves. So when you're working at a company, you're surrounded by colleagues. You have access to different departments when you have a question about something. When you go out on your own, you're on your own for the most part.
Yeah.
Most people don't hire a team on day one. Most people are genuinely solo for a while, and they're wearing all the hats. So they try to figure it out on their own. They try to use Google, or they do their own research, or they have that one or two friend network that they ask questions. What do I charge? How do I set up a contract? So the first mistake is trying to do it all yourself. That's why there's communities and co-working spaces and networks of people who can help you, surrounding yourself with people who've already been in your shoes and can answer those questions and save you time and money really, really quickly so you don't fail and burn out.
You just uttered something in passing, which is so they don't burn out, right? That burnout is real, right? People get started at this, they try to do everything, and then they grind to a halt and think, I just can't imagine hustling this hard. How do you figure out when you get started initially, particularly if you're not starting this with a bunch of capital, what to take on and what to check?
The good news is there are best practices out there. This isn't a new business model. People have already figured this out. And there's so many opportunities, whether it's a digital course or a coach or a community. There are people who already know what they're doing. The trick is finding those people that you connect with, that you feel aligned with, and leaning on them. If you have someone or a group of people where you can just ask a question anytime you have one, and you're getting the right answer every single time, that's going to save you so much headache and so many mistakes. I would also say another big mistake people make, and it's not talked about enough, is a shift in mindset. When you are an employee, even if you're a CMO or you're a high-level VP, it's in many ways somewhat passive because you're doing a job for someone else. You have multiple departments. You have someone theoretically telling you what to do in some way, shape, or form. When you're out on your own, you have a choice. You can be a service provider or you can be the CEO of your company, even if it's a company of one. And I think most people go out on their own and they see themselves as someone who delivers the work and not necessarily the CEO of their own company and of themselves. And it's a very different way of looking at what you're building, especially when it comes to the strategic nature of what you're building. Why am I doing this? What is the point? What do I hope to gain from it? How am I going to measure my success? What are my strategies for getting to those goal lines? That's thinking like a CEO, working on the business as much as you're working in the business. And I think most people start out as a consultant only working in the business. And they get on this hamster wheel of delivering work and suddenly go, wait a second, now I'm growing, I have all this work, but I haven't thought about what I'm building, how I'm growing it, what my strategy is.
Okay, now I want to get to that number 2 point, which is pricing. How does one even begin to think about pricing?
There's a lot of shame and blame when it comes to pricing. There's a lot of baggage that we bring into that pricing conversation from our past employment. You know, the time that you didn't get the promotion that you were promised, the time you didn't get the bonus you were promised, the times you were told, no, we'll talk about it next week, the time you were passed over. It's like death by 1,000 paper cuts. It adds up over the years. So when you go into your consultancy and you have to look in the mirror and determine your worth, you're taking a lot of baggage into that conversation.
Heck yeah.
A lot of baggage over the years, and it takes a lot of undoing and unlearning from past employment situations, and it's a lot of work. So I don't want to discount how hard that is, and I want to just acknowledge that it is a difficult process. It is a difficult conversation because it's not just the logic of what the value of the work is or the value of your time. It's how do I feel saying that price out loud? There's a lot of fear that prevents us from saying, hey, that's going to cost $120,000. Are you good with that? And just sitting and being quiet and letting the person respond.
Okay, so what have you learned about how to do this, Erin, from basically coaching people in peer settings around how to do this for years?
Well, it goes back to what are you building?
Yeah.
So I consulted way, way back in my 30s. I consulted out on my own for 7, 8 years. I was having my children at that time. I had a very sick child at that time that needed multiple heart surgeries. He is fine now. He is lovely. He is healthy. But it didn't start out that way.
So stressful.
And I wasn't thinking, oh, how can I maximize my income in the shortest amount of time? How can I build this agency? How can I build? I was thinking, how can I stay in the game? How can I have flexible work from a laptop, and still be in the hospital with my child? Yeah. So I was charging by the hour at that time because it was clean, it was simple, it was easy, and it was not stressful.
Yeah.
And there's no judgment on that. But if you really want to make money, you have to charge by the value. Yeah. And that is a really fun and interesting conversation because there's a lot of ways to get to value, but it's one of those things you have to treat clients a certain way, teach them what your value is, because they often come into the conversation, value equals effort, value equals the time it takes.
Well, I mean, our modern culture of productivity supports that, right? Like busy work is a way that we look back in a corporate setting when we have these salaries and these benefits and say like, oh yeah, 40 hours last week, 60 hours, 90 hours. It rarely takes into account the actual product we've created.
Was one of the reasons why I started my consultancy. Yeah. I was like, I am so quick at what I do. I'm so good at it at this point. Mm-hmm. I could do it in my sleep. I could do it in minutes, what it would take other people hours. And that was one of the many reasons why I started my consultancy. There's 2 really, really good stories. One is true and one is theoretical that helps you see the contrast of time versus value. And it's a really important concept to understand when you're pricing a project, when you're pricing your services. One is the story about a woman named Paula Scher. So this is in the early 2000s. Citi and Travelers merged into a multi-trillion-dollar company, and they needed new branding, a new logo. So they hired Paula's agency, $10 million project to rebrand this whole thing into one. About $1 million of that project was redesigning the logo. Mm-hmm. So Paula brings her team. They sit around the conference table with the Citi leaders and, listening to what they're looking for and their vision for the new brand, Citigroup. And she's sketching on a napkin and throws it across the table and says, there's your logo. And it indeed became their logo. So in 5 minutes,
right,
she designed $1 million logo. And they said, well, how were you able to do that in 5 minutes? Like,
right.
It only took you 5 minutes and this is $1 million. And she said, yeah, it took me 5 minutes, but it took me 30 years of expertise, failures, learnings, relationships to be able to sit here and in 5 minutes design a logo for $1 trillion company.
I love that story. And I will say that the hardest person to convince that value is true might be yourself.
If you don't believe it yourself, no one else will. The second story is the plumber. The plumber comes to this lady's house. She says, I have a leak. I have a leaky pipe. The plumber comes over. In 10 minutes, he's looking under the sink. He's tinkering a little bit, hits it with a wrench, and then hands her a bill for $1,000. $1,000? You were only here for 10 minutes. He's like, well, yeah, $100 is for the 10 minutes I was here. $900 is for knowing which pipe to clank to prevent your entire house from flooding.
Worth $1,000.
Worth $1,000. And this also gets to how you position what you do. Mm-hmm. If the plumber says, I'm just here to fix a pipe, that feels like a very different value than I'm here to save your house from flooding.
Yeah. That brings me to this idea of positioning, really marketing, right? So many people think, well, I can do marketing myself. I'm going to take that on myself. And so many people spend a lot of needless time doing things that don't move the needle. How do you advise people on what counts and how to figure out what counts?
There are so many marketing strategies that work. Mm. You can become an influencer on LinkedIn or a creator on LinkedIn. You can start your own podcast. That brings in clients. You can have a YouTube show. Mm. You can have a newsletter. You can go to conferences. You can speak on panels. There's all sorts of strategies, and they all work. The key is finding the strategies that are aligned with who you are as a person and having the self-awareness to know that they're aligned with for you as a person, picking 2 strategies and going deep and long on those and not giving up on them because it takes time for these things to build. So what will happen is, I'll see someone go, oh, I posted on LinkedIn and it only got, 500 views.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Post on LinkedIn twice a week for the next 6 months and then tell me what happens.
Right.
Comment on other people's posts, then tell me what happens. They want that immediate gratification, and lead gen strategies, they take time to build. And it's just so important that you pick a lead gen strategy that's aligned with you. You're not going to see me networking at a big event. I would say almost never.
Yeah.
Why? Because I'm super introverted and I'll end up standing in the corner talking to Jessi the entire time.
Which wouldn't be so
Which
bad.
would be lovely. I'd have a great time, but it doesn't really help me when it comes to lead gen.
Right.
People who can work a room, they're great in person at those big conferences. You'll never see me there, but you'll see me post on LinkedIn. You'll see me write a newsletter every week because that's something that I enjoy doing. It's something that's easy for me to do.
I want to tease 2 things out of what you said. The first is the need to stick with the strategy, right? I think it is particularly difficult. And I know that members have brought this question to me. And so I bring it to you. How do you know when to cut when something isn't working and it's time to move on versus when you just haven't given it long enough?
Depends what the thing is. If it's a lead gen strategy, 9 to 12 months before you say it's not working. But there are other strategies that you do need to cut right away if they're not working. And the most important one is so simple but so complicated, and it's how you started this podcast with asking the question, what do you do? And how you answer that question is probably one of the most important strategies of your entire consultancy. And I challenge everyone to answer the question in 10 words or less, because most people ramble. And when you ramble, you water down your message. You don't sound like the expert that you are. You confuse your audience. 10 words or less. And it forces you to edit, and choose every single word with intention and purpose.
Yeah.
But here's how you can tell it's not working. I say it's the 3 C's. So when someone says, what do you do? Which all the time people say, what do you do? And you answer that question in 10 words or less. You want to think C, confidence. Can I say that out loud and it sounds normal? It sounds like something I would say. Because I see a lot of people using very colorful, cutesy language. It doesn't sound like something they would actually say. So do I feel confident saying it? Is it clear? The second C. In other words, do they actually understand what I do after I say what I do? Because some people use these industry terms or they use these cutesy languages that people just are like, but what do you actually do?
Yeah.
And the third is curiosity. Do they then follow up with questions?
Yeah.
Does it make them curious to know more? Those 3 measurements will tell you whether it's time to change it up or keep going. So that's one that's sort of more of a micro level, that's an immediate change versus something that takes 9 to 12 months to really decide if it's working or not.
Well, I love getting that one right, too, because it becomes a larger focus for you. You can basically evaluate any aspect of how you're doing your business by putting it through the filter of, does it align with my 10 words? If it doesn't, I shouldn't be doing it.
Well, yeah, I mean, people can stray all the time. That's okay. If work comes your way and it's not in that little box you've created, if you want to do it, do it. That's great. If you want to work for that client, that's great. But the challenge in consulting is attracting clients.
Yeah.
And attracting the right clients and being able to sell yourself as an expert.
So the second thing that I wanted to pull out of what you said earlier was this idea of being consistent about a strategy over time. But it's not just enough to be consistent about the strategy. You need to be good at that strategy. And so you gave the example of posting on LinkedIn. You post on LinkedIn, say 2 times a week for 6 months and then check in. Of course, it's not enough to just do that. You also have to invest the time in making sure that you are doing it to the best of your ability in a way that will drive the kind of engagement you're looking for. And so let's not talk about LinkedIn because LinkedIn is, come on, it's why we're here, right? Let's talk about something like speaking at conferences. If this is a path you choose, it's not enough to show up at the conference. It's not enough to find your way onto a panel, you also have to make sure you're really good on that panel. And it's probably worth investing some time in coaching or preparation to make sure that you're doing that.
I'd say the opposite.
Hmm.
Yeah,
All right.
I'd say what's most important is showing up as yourself, flaws and all. You're already an expert if you've gotten this far. You already know what you're doing. And by the way, the definition of an expert isn't someone who knows everything. It's someone who never thinks they know everything, and they can't help but continue to learn and learn and learn and learn. If someone says, I know everything about this topic, they are not an expert.
Yeah.
There's just, that's not how it works. And I would say what people have to unlearn is that perfectionism that we are taught in the corporate world. That's what's valued is straight A's get you into the Ivy League school, and then the Ivy League school gets you into that Goldman Sachs program, and then perfection, 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 perfection. And a lot of those people come into consulting and they go, I'm just not where I thought I was going to be. This isn't what I thought it was going to be. This is not what I thought success would feel like or look like.
Yeah.
They're disappointed. And so unlearning that perfectionism and showing up, being like, okay, my hair might be out of place. I don't know. Like maybe my necklace is crooked. Maybe I said the wrong thing. Maybe I scratched my nose. Who cares? Showing up as a human being, being unafraid to fail, being unafraid of your flaws, and just being authentically who you are, the expert, the human being, that is what is key to getting on those stages.
So I'd love to talk a little bit about the path in between consulting and full-time employment. Many people fear once they move away from full-time employment and they become a consultant that that's what they are now. But that's not what you see at all, right?
Not at all. Not at all. In fact, once you become a consultant, once you're out on your own, I don't care if it's a month or 10 years, once you've gone out on your own, that is the hardest choice to make. You've done the hard thing. You've made the decision and you've done the thing. What happens afterwards doesn't matter so much.
Yeah.
The fact that you pushed through that fear and did it, it is like a personal development accelerant. You become so much more self-aware. You have to sell yourself like you've never done before. It's no longer, what does this job pay? It's, this is what that costs. This is what I charge. That's a really different shift in dynamic. It's boundaries. It's I don't email my clients past 5 p.m. You can't always do that in a full-time job. I don't know many full-time jobs where you can just fully shut off. And some of us joke like, we should interview for a full-time job just to see what we could get. You ask for more. You negotiate better. You have better boundaries. You have more confidence in your worth. That all comes from being out on your own, wearing all the hats and having to sell yourself and failing a lot and getting back up.
One thing that I find interesting when talking about pricing is that so often women tell me, well, I asked a friend of mine who is often somebody who is similar in them to the profile, another woman. We don't encourage each other to ask for enough. And I'm curious if that is something you see and how we push through that.
I would just be careful who you ask, because people, I see people all the time who say, oh, I asked my friend what to charge, or I asked another consultant what to charge. Like, you asked one person what to charge. How do you know that person's charging enough? How do you know what makes them the expert?
Right.
You need diversity of thought leadership all around you from different spaces, different industries, different backgrounds, talking about pricing. And that's why one of my biggest values is transparency. I think once we start talking about it openly and sharing and telling each other what we're charging for different engagements and speaking slots and projects, all of a sudden the walls come down and the opportunities open up. Now, some people will say, oh, shoot, I was really undercharging and that does not feel good.
Yep.
And I'm embarrassed, but they've learned from it and they never do it again.
It also seems like there are entire industries that are going through a bit of a nuclear winter. Like, we've had many people on the show who work in DEI. And so then they're in a position where they have a whole set of skills that they did apply to one set of problems. Feels like a critical moment to think broadly about how you can take those same skills and apply them to different types of problems.
Yes and no. Roughly half the country still really embraces DEI.
Yeah.
When you're a consultant, you don't need 10,000 clients. You need 3 to 10 a year.
Yeah.
There are way more than 10 companies out there who are still hiring and valuing DEI topics, leadership and development. In fact, the people I know in DEI are leaning even harder into it. Instead of going into scarcity mode and saying, oh, now we can't use the word inclusive and now we can't use the word. Find the companies that still are. There are thousands of them.
Yeah.
Thousands of them. And they may not be in your physical geographic location, but guess what? Like ever since COVID, now we can work anywhere and you can have clients anywhere. You can go to Europe. There's European clients that would hire you. There are opportunities. Don't go into doom and gloom mode or scarcity mode or pivot mode before you zoom out and realize, wait a second, I only need 5 or 10 clients. They all still exist. They're all out there waiting for me.
Right. So as people are thinking about building these businesses, what does a sustainable consulting business look like for someone at the end of year 1 versus, say, at the end of year 3?
I think it's really hard to give a one-size-fits-all for what sustainable looks like when there's so many different models. The key is making those decisions very early on. Write it down on a piece of paper. How do I define success right now? How will I measure that success? Do it before you ever get a client and get clouded and start second-guessing yourself, because a year down the road, you're going to look at that checklist and go, wait, oh, I wrote more flexibility. I do have more flexibility. I wrote more time with my kids. Oh, I do have more time with my kids. I wrote make back my former corporate salary. I did that and more this year.
Yeah.
If you don't predetermine how you're going to measure your success, you're going to be chasing a goalpost that always moves and you're never going to reach it, because there's always someone that looks more successful than you. And I say looks because we never know unless you're in their bank account. There's always someone who looks more successful than you that's going to make you deviate from your lane, from your focus. So keep your blinders on, stay focused, know how you're measuring your success before you really get started. And only then can you determine after a year if your business is sustainable.
That was Erin Halper, CEO of The Upside. You should check it out. And also follow Erin on LinkedIn. She is very active and gives great advice. Now, a few things that I want you to walk away thinking about. First of all, can you describe what you do in 10 words or less? If you are struggling, you might want to keep in mind Erin's 3 C's: confidence, clarity, and curiosity. These 3 C's will help you get to those 10 words, and they're necessary, believe me. Okay, number 2, compensation. We have so much baggage around compensation, and Erin is the first to tell you that. I want you to keep in mind that when you are setting your rates, when you are asking people to pay you for what you bring to the table, it is so much more than a product. It is the years of work and study and, frankly, pattern recognition that provide you the intuition to be able to be sharp in the work that you do. Make sure that you're asking for compensation for that. Finally, consulting is not a solo sport. Sure, you're going to go into business on your own, and there are going to be days that feel really lonely. But if you're going to be successful at it, you will be successful because of your community. Now, there are many ready-made communities of people who are leaning in to help solve each other's problems. The Upside is a great example of this. And you will piece together a community for yourself. Don't give this short shrift. Spend your time here. It's critical. We're going to talk about this and so much more this week on Office Hours. We'll get into all your questions, so bring them. And my guess is you have a lot of advice too if you're in this business, because we learn as we go. I will be getting together with our senior producer, Sarah Storm, this Wednesday afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern. If you're on the East Coast, grab a coffee. If you're on the West Coast, maybe you want to bring your lunch. If you're having trouble finding us, we'll stick a link in the show notes. Now, if this episode resonated for you, if you learned even one thing, I want you to pick up your phone right now and text this episode to a friend just starting out in consulting. I bet they need it. Now, we will be back next Monday with another fresh episode of Hello Monday. Until then, thanks for joining us in the studio today.